Good afternoon. I'm Andy Cantrell, and this is my workshop presentation on social penetration theory. I'd be using this presentation with my juniors and seniors in the Essential Communications class that I teach. Hi, everybody. Yesterday we were talking about the basics of communications, and one of the things that we talked about was proxemics and this idea of social distance, intimate distance, and how we allow those that we're close to invade our personal space much more so than we do those that we're not very well acquainted with. But one of the things that we didn't talk about yesterday was how relationships are formed. So today that's what I want to talk about is how do we get to know one another and form relationships? So really this comes down to the social penetration theory. And this theory just addresses how relationships develop from superficial types of interactions with others to more intimate interactions with one another. This idea of relational closeness. And what this study really says, or what this theory really says, is that intimacy develops through sharing information with others. And that process of sharing information with others is called self-disclosure. So self-disclosure is just us voluntarily sharing information with others back and forth. And the types of information that we share begin very superficial in the beginning. Hi, how are you? Boy, what's the weather out? Think it's going to rain today, kinds of conversations. And then as you get to know one another, then the amount of information that you share and the intimacy of the information that you share begins to develop a little more fully and get deeper. The process of self-disclosure, this sharing of information back and forth, happens really rapidly at the beginning of the relationship. And then as you get to know one another, it begins to slow down as you share information that's more personal and more intimate. One of the things that's interesting that this theory helps us to understand is that we've all had those situations in which somebody that we've just met kind of overshares and tells us information that we're thinking, boy, why are you telling me this? I barely even know you. This theory explains why that happens. In early parts of relationships, if someone shares information that's too intimate and personal, it really makes the other partner feel uncomfortable and can cause that relationship to stall and not grow any further. When talking about self-disclosure, the idea is that there is breadth and depth. And basically, those are just two fancy terms for the range of topics that we share. The information, the range of topics that you cover in your conversations is the breadth. The depth refers to the degree of intimacy or how private of the information is that you share with others. And this information, both the breadth and the depth, is very important in relationship development. Now, what also happens is in this process of self-disclosure, sharing information with others, we have to determine if the reward, which is basically the relationship growing closer, is worth the potential costs. And the potential costs could be maybe we say something that we feel is silly and embarrassing, and we wish that we hadn't said it. Or it could be sharing information with someone that then they take and share with others. And that information may not have been something that you would have been comfortable sharing with others. So in the back of our minds sometimes, or sometimes even as a conscious effort, we have to say, is the risk worth sharing this information? So the reward has to outweigh the cost.
I don't get it, Shrek. Why don't you just pull some of that ogre stuff on him? Throttle him, lay siege to his fortress, grind his bones to make your bread. The whole ogre trip.
Oh, I know what. Maybe I could have decapitated an entire village and put their heads on a plate, got a knife, cut open their spleen, and drink their fluids. Does that sound good to you?
No, not really, no.
For your information, there's a lot more to ogres than people think.
Example?
Example? Okay, ogres are like onions.
They stink?
Yes. No.
Oh, they make you cry?
No.
Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they get all brown, start sprouting little white hairs.
No. Layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it. We both have layers.
Oh, you both have layers. Oh. Not everybody like onions.
All right, my kids, you hear me talk about my two kids all the time, and they just love Shrek. So I've seen the movie over and over again. So as I was studying about this theory, that clip came to my mind in helping to explain the next part of this theory and how relationships are formed. And that's the onion metaphor. And basically, the layers of the onion represent the layers of our personality. And the outermost layers consists of information that's viewable by everyone. So information like our height and our weight, those types of things. And then as we begin to peel away the layers and get to the inner core of the onion or our personalities is where we begin to share more information like our attitudes, beliefs, and emotions, more private, personal types of information. Now, each relationship goes through several stages, and there's really 5 stages of relational development. The first stage is the orientation of interaction stage. And this is where you have small talk. So this might be where you're at the grocery store and the little old lady in front of you strikes up a conversation as you're waiting to check out. Or it might be when you go to Starbucks in the morning and the girl that's making your latte, you share some information and just kind of small talk. How's the weather? Did you see the game last night? Those types of things. This is with strangers, basically. Then we go on to the exploratory affective exchange stage. And this is the stage in which we see casual friendships. So when you look around this room and you see all the other people in this room, this is where most of them would fall in casual friendships. And this is where you would share information about like your educational background, where you work, the activities that you were involved with here at school, those types of things. And it also is when you begin to share more information about your personal attitudes and maybe talk about moderate topics like education and maybe current events, those types of things. The important thing to know is that many relationships don't ever go beyond this stage. They stay right in this stage. So as you look around this room, you know that there are people that you talk to and that you have a casual relationship with just because they're in this class. And that the minute that you walk out this door, you probably wouldn't speak to them, or you're not going to hang out with them on the weekends or anything like that. Now, the next stage is the affective exchange stage, and this is where you begin discussing private personal matters. And if we're talking about like a romantic relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, this might be where the hand-holding begins, or maybe kissing and those types of things. Then we get to the stable exchange stage, and this is where you share your deepest personal beliefs and thoughts and values. This is where marriages would fall into place. This would be your relationships with your family in most cases. And what happens in this stage, the stable exchange stage, is we see that relationships begin to plateau. They've kind of reached that stage where everything's just kind of even, and you have gotten to the point that you've really gotten to know each other well enough, even to the point that you can predict how someone's going to react to certain situations or to maybe information that they receive, those types of things. And the final stage is deep penetration. And it's important to know that not all relationships reach this stage. Relationships that reach deep penetration are ones in which they're breaking down. It's the ones in which you realize, you know what, the amount of effort that I'm putting into this relationship, the cost of being in this relationship, the cost of this friendship is not worth what I'm getting out of it. And this is where relationships break down and eventually terminate, where you're no longer friends with that person, you no longer have interaction with them. Another important aspect in relationship development is similarity and attraction. And it's no surprise to us that we are attracted to people that we're more similar to. And that similarity extends to the content of the information that we share, as well as the intimacy of the information that we share. So similarity in depth and similarity in breadth, to use the terms that we discussed earlier, lead to attraction, which help establish relationships. Another aspect that I know is probably pretty interesting to most of you is the idea of technology and the impact that it has on relational development. And what some researchers found from a study that they did was that there is a definite sequence of media use that's tied to those different stages of relational development that we just discussed a little bit ago. And the interesting thing is that people tend to feel more comfortable using tools like Facebook in the early stages, where they can post information, they can friend somebody, they can share some pictures, but it's not really, deep, personal, intimate information that they're sharing. It is just kind of surface level kinds of stuff. And so they feel comfortable sharing that type of information over Facebook with others. As the relationship begins to form, then we see that there's a little more comfort and people begin to use instant messaging. They begin to text one another until then, when you've reached that deepest stage of friendship, then you begin to call each other on the phone and feel comfortable conversing back and forth that way rather than just using technology. Another interesting aspect of this is that females tend to use technology for more social kinds of purposes, in contacting their friends and, just calling somebody up or texting them just to say, hey, just thought I'd give you a call, wanted to talk, or something like that. Guys, though, on the other hand, are much more likely to use technology for a purpose of sharing information, maybe information about a class, or maybe to set up a study group, or to send documents back and forth to one another, or to send out a sports team schedule, something like that. So they tend to not use it as socially as the ladies. And guys, most of you know that you'd probably feel pretty awkward for whatever reason, just calling up one of your buddies and say, hey, I just want to chit chat with you for a little bit. People. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of idea, and you can take the information that we've talked about today and use that and look at how the relationships that you have with others have formed over time, and to see, yeah, that really does make sense, and have just a better understanding of the role in which communication and self-disclosure play in forming relationships with others. Thanks.